This assignment asked you to decide on a pricing scenario for a stand-up paddleboard program, and then go back and fill out the revenue and expenses part of your budget. So the instructions asked you to start on this third sheet. This is where we're going to decide what the cost per class is, and then decide on a pricing scenario for either 20 classes, 40, 60, or 80 classes. And then we need to forecast how many participants we think are going to feasibly come to our program. So our choices are either 4 participants, 5 participants, or 6 participants. And so as you can see in this first column with 20 classes, I've already kind of done the math for you as an example. So this example column looked at us offering 20 paddleboard classes, and then we figured out the kind of the break-even cost per participant for the scenario with either 4 participants, 5 participants, or 6 participants in this 20 class situation. So now we need to figure out the cost per class for 4 participants, 5, or 6 participants across the rest of these different class quantities. And I'm not going to do this whole thing because that would take too long, but I'm going to pick something in the middle. So I'm just going to pick this 60 class scenario, and I'll just start here at the top and work my way down. So I'm looking at 60 classes, offering 60 stand-up paddleboard classes, and so I need to figure out my part-time salary at $25 a class. So $25 a class times 60 classes is going to come out to be $1,500. So that's going to turn out to be my part-time salary expense. And that also means that the total cost, so now that I've got this part-time salary expense, the total cost for me offering 60 stand-up paddleboard classes is $6,000. And that means that regardless of how many participants show up, for me to have the instructor out on the pool deck for this class, plus office expense, plus maintenance expense, plus equipment, plus supplies, is going to turn out to be $6,000 for me to offer 60 classes. So that's $6,000 divided across 60 classes gives me $100 per class. So each class where I have the instructor out there and all of these expenses divided across 60 classes, that comes out to be $100 per class. So now I need to divide that cost per class by 6 participants, which turns out to be $1,667. If I have $100 per class and 5 participants in each class, that comes out to be $20 if I have 5 participants in each class. And then if I only have 4 participants come per class, that's going to be $25 per participant per class. So my break-even point per participant per class is down here. And you can see where if I have more participants, if I forecast more participants in each class, then that cost, that break-even cost per participant per class is lower than if I have 5 participants or 4 participants. So it's cheaper per participant per class if we can get more participants in each class. And down here I asked you to go ahead and commit to forecasting a certain number of participants. So keep in mind that if you forecast 4 participants, it's going to be more expensive. If you forecast 6 participants, it means that maybe that's optimistic. Maybe you are really going to work hard to market this program. It's up to you. I just want you to kind of tell me what you're planning on and why. And I'm going to choose to pick this, I've done this 60 classes column. I'm going to choose to pick 5 participants for this situation, just because I'm just going to decide to forecast somewhere in the middle. It is a new and exciting program. Maybe people will want to take it for that reason, but I just don't think it's realistic to forecast a full class every single time at this 6 participants. I'm going to decide to be just a little bit more conservative and forecast at this $20 $20 because I'm picking 5 participants for 60 classes. So my scenario is 60 classes with 5 participants in it. So whichever pricing scenario you decided to go with, what I was looking for was your thought related to 2 variables. And those variables were how many classes you want to offer and why, and then how many participants you forecast and why. So really, I just wanted to see you put a little thought into both of these variables in picking your particular price scenario. And for the rest of this assignment, I'm going to go ahead and commit to this pricing scenario up here, which was 60 classes with 5 participants, and that brings my break-even cost per class per participant up to $20. So I'm going to use that for the rest of this assignment. So now I'm going to scroll back up and finish the revenues and expenses. I'm going to finish the rest of my budget based on my pricing scenario of 60 classes, 5 participants per class, and that break-even cost that I just calculated, which I need to do for the rest of my budget, is $20 per class. So I'm going to go ahead and fill out my expense side, and the only thing I'm missing here is my one variable cost, and that was part-time salary. So remember back on that pricing worksheet, I had $25 per class times 60 classes, and that came out to be $1,500 for my instructor expense. And that's going to be my variable expense because that depends on how many classes I offered. So the part-time salary was my variable cost because it was more at 60 classes than it was at 20 classes. And the expenses that were fixed were all the rest. The office expense didn't change with how many classes I decided to offer. Maintenance was the same. It was $1,000 whether I offered 20 classes or 60 classes. Equipment was the same, and program supplies were the same. So the way you looked at fixed and variable expenses should have looked something like that. And now that we have our variable cost of part-time salary, we can add up the rest of that total expense. And so that total expense is going to end up being the same as we calculated before on our worksheet, $6,000. So now we have our total expense. So let's scroll up to our revenue, and we're just going to finish it. We're going to balance it out. And the revenue sources for our program, there were only 2. Here was our facility rental that was set at $5,000. So that one was fixed. So we'll type that in. And the variable one is right here, our program registration fees. And this one, again, it's up to you to decide. So I'm going to go ahead and write down here our program registration fees were variable because they depend on the cost per class. And up here in the revenue, I get to decide what I set it at. And because I work at UALR in campus recreation, and this program is for students, and I want it to be as accessible as possible to the students, I'm going to go ahead and just set the registration fee at my break-even cost. And my break-even cost was $20 times 60 classes times 5 participants per class. And so my total program registration fee for this class is going to be the exact same thing that I forecasted down here. It's going to be this, it's going to equal this total cost of the program. So it's going to equal that $6,000. So my costs for the program are pretty much going to equal my expenses for the program. And now I do have this extra $5,000 up here, and I'm just going to decide that I'm just going to keep that there. I'm going to use that to pay for some other stuff, maybe some equipment. So my total revenue here is going to be $1,100. This 6,000 plus 5,000. And so my revenue sources for the program, I've got those facility rental plus the program registration fees. And I'm just going to keep these at the $6,000, see how it goes for the year, and that'll be kind of my cushion if less than 5 people sign up for it. So that's kind of my rationale there. So you could have done this assignment 100 different ways in deciding how you're going to price, what expenses you're going to use for what. But what I want to see is you deciding on a pricing scenario and using your expenses and using those expenses to decide on a revenue situation and kind of go from there in deciding the pricing for your program. And really the only requirement was that your revenue had to be equal to or greater than your expenses, because that's how most program budgets work. So however you made it to finish with revenue greater than expenses is really up to you, and then identifying those fixed and variable sources of revenue. So that's how we kind of looked at a program budget in this assignment.